The Smartest Guys in the Room, by Bethany McLean and Peter Elkind. Introduction. On a cool Texas night in late January 2002, a man named Cliff Baxter slipped quietly out of bed, careful not to wake his sleeping wife. He was 43 years old, the son of a policeman, and by any measure, he had made it. He lived in a large, beautiful home in a wealthy Houston suburb. Before quitting his job just 8 months earlier, he had been the vice chairman of one of America's largest and most admired corporations. He was a millionaire, many times over. But as he climbed into his new black Mercedes-Benz and drove out into the empty streets, he was drowning in dark thoughts. His old company, a giant named Enron, had collapsed in the biggest bankruptcy in American history, and the scandal was consuming him. He felt like everyone was after him. Congress, the FBI, the lawyers, the media, they all wanted to know, how could America's seventh biggest company just disappear? Where did the billions of dollars go? A little after 2 in the morning, Baxter parked his car in the middle of an empty street, the engine still running, the headlights cutting through the dark. Then, he lifted a .357 Magnum revolver to his right temple and pulled the trigger. How does a man who has everything end up with nothing left to live for? And how does a company that seemed to have the world at its feet end up as a symbol for corporate greed and corruption? This is the story of Enron. And it's the story we're going to unravel today, based on the brilliant book, The Smartest Guys in the Room, by Bethany McLean and Peter Elkind. It's a story that's more than just numbers on a balance sheet. It's a human story about ambition, pride, and the dangerous illusion of success. It's about a group of people who truly believed they were the smartest people in any room they walked into, and how that belief led them, and thousands of others, to ruin. By the end of our time together, you'll understand not just what happened at Enron, but why. And you'll see that this tale, though it happened years ago, is a powerful lesson for our own time, a cautionary tale about the seductive nature of success and the quiet, slippery slope that leads from bending the rules to breaking them entirely. This is a story that, once you hear it, you'll never forget. Book summary. To understand the rise and fall of Enron, you first have to understand the man who started it all, Kenneth Lay. Ken Lay's story is a classic American tale. He grew up dirt poor, the son of a Baptist preacher in the Ozarks of Missouri. Until he was 11 years old, he had never lived in a house with indoor plumbing. From a young age, he was driven by a powerful ambition to escape that poverty and make his fortune. He was brilliant, a serious student who earned a Ph.D. in economics. But his real passion wasn't just theory, it was the power of the free market. Lay got his start in the energy business, but not the glamorous side, not oil, the stuff of legends and empires. His destiny was in a much humbler hydrocarbon, natural gas. Back then, the natural gas pipeline business was one of the sleepiest industries in America. The government controlled everything, the price you paid for gas, the price you could sell it for. You just bought gas, moved it through your pipes, and collected a tidy, guaranteed profit. As one former executive said, you'd have to make 1 or 2 decisions a year. But Ken Lay saw a different future. He was a powerful believer in the dogma of deregulation. He preached about unshackling the gas industry, letting the free market set the prices. He envisioned a world where the old, slow pipeline companies would be replaced by a new kind of gas major, a company with the brains, power, and global reach of the great oil giants. And, of course, he saw himself as the man to build it. On the surface, Lay was a hard man not to like. He had a modest, Midwestern manner, a gift for remembering names, and a way of making you feel like he truly cared about what you thought. But underneath that gentle exterior was a man who hated conflict. He wanted people to like him, and he avoided the tough decisions that might make them mad. His management style was famously described as ready, fire, aim. He would take rapid action, any action, just to keep things moving forward. In 1985, after a series of shrewd maneuvers, Lay orchestrated the merger of two pipeline companies, Houston Natural Gas and Inter-North, to create a new company with the largest gas pipeline system in the country. They needed a new, trendy name. After a consulting firm suggested Enron, which turned out to be a term for the digestive tract, they hastily settled on a runner-up, Enron. But the new company was in deep trouble from the start. It was drowning in debt. A glut of natural gas caused prices to plunge, creating a crisis with something called take-or-pay contracts, where Enron was forced to pay for gas it couldn't sell. By 1987, the company's credit rating was junk, and there were worries about whether they could even make payroll. Ken Lay and Enron desperately needed a source of profits, and they needed it fast. And that's when the first real crack in Enron's foundation appeared. Tucked away in a suburb of New York City was a small, flashy division called Enron Oil. It wasn't a gritty industrial operation, it was a trading floor. The traders there weren't moving oil, they were speculating on its price, making bets on which way the market would go. The man in charge was a brilliant but shadowy figure named Louis Bourget. To the executives back in Houston, Bourget was a miracle worker. In a year when the rest of Enron was losing money, his traders made the company $28 million. The message from headquarters was simple and direct. One senior executive sent Bourget a telex that read, "Please keep making us millions." But there was a problem. Bourget wasn't just trading, he was cooking the books. He was creating fictitious losses to shift profits from one quarter to the next, helping the company hit the earnings numbers it needed to keep its bankers happy. When internal auditors discovered this, along with a secret bank account, they were horrified. But when Bourget was summoned to Houston, management's reaction was stunning. Ken Lay and his team knew the traders were essential to the company's financial appearance. As one accountant involved later said, no one pounded the table and said these guys are crooks. They thought they had the golden goose, and the golden goose just stole a little money out of their petty cash. They decided to keep Bourget, believing he was a profitable crook. They were wrong on both counts. Not only was Bourget stealing from Enron, but he was also taking massive, unauthorized risks. He was making huge bets that the price of oil would fall, and the market kept moving against him. He doubled down again and again, digging a hole so deep that by October 1987, he had secretly exposed the company to a potential loss of over $1 billion, more than Enron was worth. The company was, as one executive put it, less than worthless. Through a combination of luck and the skilled work of another trader who came in to clean up the mess, Enron narrowly avoided bankruptcy. The final loss was around $140 million. Publicly, Ken Lay claimed he was shocked by the actions of these rogue traders. At an employee meeting, he challenged anyone to stand up if they could say he knew what was going on. One executive who had repeatedly warned Lay about the traders had to be physically restrained by two colleagues to keep him from standing up. The Enron oil scandal was the canary in the coal mine. It revealed a culture where hitting the numbers was more important than telling the truth, where leadership was willing to look the other way as long as the money was rolling in, and where appearances mattered more than reality. It was a pattern that would repeat itself, over and over, on a much grander scale. After the oil scandal, Enron was still a company searching for a future. Ken Lay had his grand vision of deregulation, but he had no idea how to actually make big profits in this new world. What the company needed was a new architect, a visionary who could design a business model for the modern age. They found him in a brilliant, brash, and fiercely arrogant consultant from McKinsey & Company named Jeffrey Skilling. People who knew Skilling didn't just call him smart, they used words like incandescently brilliant. He could process information with breathtaking speed and present his ideas with a certainty that bordered on religious fervor. He had a Ph.D. from Harvard Business School and a harshly Darwinian view of the world. He believed that greed was the greatest motivator and that markets were the ultimate judge of right and wrong. When Skilling looked at the natural gas industry, he didn't see pipes and molecules. He saw a financial market waiting to be born. His big idea, which he called the gas bank, was revolutionary. Instead of just moving gas, Enron would become a financial intermediary. It would buy gas from producers under long-term contracts and sell it to customers under similar long-term deals. Enron, the bank in the middle, would lock in the profit from the spread between the buy and sell price. Suddenly, the price of gas on any given day didn't matter. Enron was no longer just a pipeline company, it was a risk management company. But Skilling's vision went even further. He realized that these gas contracts, these promises to buy and sell gas in the future, could be turned into financial instruments, like stocks or bonds, that could be traded. Enron created a massive trading operation, becoming the market maker for this new commodity. The idea was to free natural gas from its physical constraints. An obligation to deliver gas was no longer about a specific pipeline. It was a financial commitment that could be hedged and traded. In 1990, Skilling left McKinsey to join Enron and build this new business. To do it, he made a demand that would change everything. He insisted that his new division use a special kind of accounting called mark-to-market. Now, this might sound technical, but it's the key to understanding the entire Enron illusion. With normal accounting, you book profits as the cash actually comes in the door. If you sign a 10-year deal, you record the profits year by year, for 10 years. But with mark-to-market accounting, you can estimate the entire future value of that 10-year deal and book all of those projected profits on the very day you sign the contract. Why was this so important to Skilling? Because he believed a company should be rewarded for the idea, the creative act of making the deal, not the boring, mundane work of executing it over many years. But you can see the danger, can't you? First, there's a huge mismatch between profits and cash. You might report $1 billion in profits, but you don't actually have the money. It's just an estimate of money you hope to get over the next decade. You can't run a business on paper profits forever. The second, more dangerous problem is that it creates a desperate need for growth. It's like a treadmill. Once you book all the future profits from a deal, you can't count them again next year. To show growth, you have to do more and more deals, each bigger than the last, just to keep the earnings numbers climbing. With the SEC's blessing, Enron became the first company outside the financial industry to use mark-to-market accounting for its trading business. It was like giving a sports car to a teenager who just got his driver's license. The potential for abuse was enormous. Who could say what the price of natural gas would be 10 or 20 years from now? The estimates were, at best, educated guesses. And when you needed a little extra income to hit the numbers you promised Wall Street, the temptation to make those guesses a little more optimistic was overwhelming. Skilling set out to build an organization in his own image. He liked to hire what he called guys with spikes, people with a singular, narrow talent, no matter their other shortcomings. Egomaniacs, backstabbers, social misfits, it didn't matter, as long as they were smart and could make money. He created a brutal internal review system, known as the Performance Review Committee, or PRC, where employees were ranked against each other every 6 months. The bottom 10% were supposed to be fired. It was called rank and yank, and it fostered a culture of ruthless internal competition. One of Skilling's key lieutenants, who perfectly embodied this culture, was a man named Lou Pye. Pye was the architect of Enron's trading operation, a fierce corporate warlord who eliminated anyone who got in his way. But he was also known for something else. his obsession with strippers. A married father of two, Pi was a regular at Houston's upscale gentlemen's clubs, routinely charging $1,000 tabs to his Enron expense account. Few other companies would have tolerated it, but Pi made money, and in Skilling's Enron, that's all that mattered. While Skilling was building his trading empire, another Enron superstar was building a very different kind of business. Her name was Rebecca Mark. If Skilling was the intellectual purist who hated physical assets, Mark was his opposite. She was a glamorous and tenacious dealmaker who ran Enron's international division, a business that was nothing but hard assets, power plants and pipelines in some of the most remote and riskiest corners of the globe. She and Skilling were fierce rivals, locked in a battle for the soul of the company. Mark believed she was on a mission, bringing power and free market capitalism to developing nations. She jetted around the world, striking massive deals in places like India, Brazil, and the Dominican Republic. Her most famous project was a gigantic $3 billion power plant in a remote Indian village called Dabhol. It was supposed to be her masterpiece, but it became a symbol of everything wrong with Enron's global ambition. The deal was plagued by accusations of bribery, human rights abuses, and a one-sided contract that the Indian government ultimately couldn't afford. The plant was eventually shut down, a gleaming white elephant on the Arabian Sea. But the most poisonous part of the international business was the compensation. The dealmakers, like Mark, were paid huge bonuses based on the projected value of a deal at the moment it was signed, long before a single foundation was poured or a single penny of profit was actually earned. It created a mindless incentive to do deals, any deals, no matter how risky or poorly conceived. The more deals they did, the richer they got. There was no financial reason to care if the projects ever actually worked. By the mid-1990s, Enron seemed to have it all. It had a story Wall Street loved, a company that was transforming itself into a new economy powerhouse, with Skilling's asset-light trading business on one side and Mark's globe-trotting development empire on the other. Profits were soaring, and the stock price tripled between 1990 and 1995. But beneath the surface, the company was becoming a house of cards. The new businesses were consuming cash at an alarming rate, and the debt was piling up. To keep the illusion of steady, predictable growth alive, Enron needed a new kind of magic. And for that, they turned to a young, ambitious finance executive named Andrew Fastow. Fastow was hired by Skilling in 1990. His specialty was something called structured finance. In simple terms, his job was to find clever ways to raise money for Enron without it showing up as debt on the company's balance sheet. He became Enron's Wizard of Oz, creating a giant illusion of prosperity. He and his team in a division called Global Finance created a bewildering array of off-balance sheet vehicles, complex partnerships with names like Jedi, Chuko, and Raptor. The core idea was to sell Enron's troubled assets, the underperforming power plants, the risky tech investments, to these outside partnerships. This allowed Enron to get the assets off its books and, more importantly, immediately book profits from the sale. But here was the trick: these partnerships weren't really independent. The outside investor was often just a friend of Enron, and the deals were structured so that Enron secretly guaranteed that the investor would make a profit. In essence, Enron was hedging its own bad bets with itself, using its own soaring stock price as the ultimate collateral. It was, as one banker described it, an unnatural act. It was an accounting artifice that protected Enron from reporting losses on paper, but did nothing to protect it from actual economic losses. This created a terrifyingly fragile loop. As long as Enron's stock price kept rising, the structures held together. But if the stock ever started to fall, the whole thing would collapse. Fastow was handsomely rewarded for his work, but it wasn't enough. He was driven by a deep insecurity and a desperate need to be seen as one of Enron's big earners, like the traders and dealmakers. So, in 1999, he came to Skilling and Lay with an audacious proposal. He wanted to create and run his own private equity fund, called LJM, the initials of his wife and 2 sons, that would do deals with Enron. Think about that for a moment. The chief financial officer of a major public company wanted to run an outside fund whose primary purpose was to buy assets from his own company. It was a conflict of interest so blatant, so staggering, that one Anderson accountant wrote in an internal email, "Why would any director in his or her right mind ever approve such a scheme?" But Enron's board did approve it. They waived the company's code of ethics, believing Fastow's claim that this was the only way to find a reliable partner for these crucial financing deals. The game was rigged. Fastow was on both sides of every transaction. LJM bought Enron's worst assets, the dogs that no one else would touch, allowing Enron to hide its losses and hit its quarterly earnings targets. In return, Fastow made sure LJM always made a spectacular profit, often through secret handshake deals where Enron promised to buy the assets back later at a guaranteed premium. Over just a few years, Fastow secretly pocketed more than $60 million from his LJM partnerships. He had his magic, and he was getting rich from it. By the year 2000, Enron was at the absolute peak of its power and prestige. The stock hit an all-time high of $90 a share, giving the company a market value of nearly $70 billion. Fortune magazine named it America's most innovative company for the 6th year in a row. Lay and Skilling were celebrated as business visionaries. But the pressure to keep the magic going was becoming unbearable. The new big enchiladas, the retail energy businesses and the much-hyped broadband venture, were burning through billions of dollars and producing almost no real profits. And then there was California. In 2000 and 2001, California's newly deregulated energy market descended into chaos, with rolling blackouts, skyrocketing prices, and utilities driven to the brink of bankruptcy. Enron's traders, led by a man named Tim Belden, saw the flawed system not as a problem to be fixed, but as a game to be won. They devised a series of cynical strategies with nicknames like Death Star and Ricochet to manipulate the market, creating artificial congestion and phantom demand to drive prices up and reap hundreds of millions in profits. Publicly, Skilling and Lay blamed California for its own feckless policies, with Skilling joking, "You know what the difference is between the state of California and the Titanic? At least the lights were on when the Titanic went down." The arrogance was breathtaking. By early 2001, the bull market was over, and the world was changing. Investors were becoming skeptical. Short sellers, investors who bet that a stock will go down, began digging into Enron's financial statements. They saw a company with soaring profits but no cash, a mountain of off-balance sheet debt, and financial footnotes that were utterly incomprehensible. On a conference call in April 2001, after announcing another stellar quarter, Skilling was challenged by a short seller named Richard Grubman, who asked why Enron was the only financial institution that couldn't produce a balance sheet with its earnings statement. After a tense exchange, Skilling muttered under his breath, "Ashol." The traders on the floor erupted in applause. But the mask was slipping. The stock continued to slide. The pressure on Skilling was immense. The stock, his ultimate report card, was failing him. The big ideas had run out. His old lieutenants were cashing out and leaving. He hated what his job had become, a constant struggle to fix problems and maintain an illusion. On August 14, 2001, just 6 months after becoming CEO, Jeff Skilling abruptly resigned, citing purely personal reasons. No one believed him. His departure sent shockwaves through Wall Street and fueled intense speculation that something was terribly wrong inside the company. The day after Skilling left, a vice president named Sharon Watkins, who had been investigating the Raptor partnerships, sent an anonymous letter to Ken Lay. "I am incredibly nervous," she wrote, "that we will implode in a wave of accounting scandals." The unraveling came with stunning speed. Lay, back in the CEO chair, insisted everything was fine, that the company's stock was an incredible bargain, but the financial structures, built on the foundation of a high stock price, were collapsing. On October 16, Enron announced a staggering $1 billion charge and revealed a $1.2 billion reduction in shareholder equity, both tied to Fastow's partnerships. The next day, the Wall Street Journal published the first of a series of articles exposing the sordid details of Fastow's self-dealing. The company was in a death spiral. A crisis of confidence became a run on the bank. Trading partners demanded their money back. Credit agencies downgraded Enron's debt to junk status. The company was out of cash. A last-ditch attempt to sell the company to its smaller crosstown rival, Dynegy, fell apart when Dynegy realized the true depth of Enron's problems. On December 2, 2001, Enron filed for bankruptcy. The seventh largest company in America, a company with a market value of $70 billion just a year earlier, was gone. Thousands of employees lost their jobs and their life savings, which were tied up in now worthless Enron stock. The smartest guys in the room had flown too close to the sun, and the world was left to pick up the pieces. Commentary. When you step back from the dizzying details of Enron, the Raptors, the Chucos, the Death Stars, what you're left with is a deeply human story. It's a story about how quickly ambition can curdle into arrogance, and how easily a company, and the people in it, can lose their way. The leaders of Enron didn't start out as criminals. They started as innovators, visionaries who wanted to change the world. Ken Lay genuinely believed in the power of free markets. Jeff Skilling genuinely believed he had discovered a new way to do business. But they became so enamored with their own brilliance, so obsessed with the perception of success, that they lost touch with reality. They created a culture that celebrated the deal over the details, the appearance of profit over the reality of cash. They rewarded people for finding clever ways around the rules, not for building sustainable businesses. And when the pressure mounted to hit impossible earnings targets quarter after quarter, that culture of creativity became a culture of deception. The line between bending the rules and breaking them simply disappeared. One of the most powerful lessons from the smartest guys in the room is the danger of what the authors call the slippery slope. It rarely starts with a massive, premeditated fraud. It starts with a small compromise. A tiny adjustment to an assumption to make the numbers look a little better. A willingness to look the other way at a conflict of interest because the person is making us millions, and each small compromise makes the next one easier, until you find yourself in a place you never imagined you could be, defending actions you know are wrong. This story is a powerful reminder that the numbers on a page are not the same as reality. Enron looked like one of the most successful companies in the world. It had soaring profits, a skyrocketing stock price, and the adoration of Wall Street. But it was all an illusion, a house of cards built on accounting tricks and hidden debt. The real measure of a business, and of a life, is not how successful you appear to be, but the real, tangible value you create. It's about cash, not just reported earnings. It's about integrity, not just cleverness. So what can we take away from this today? First, always ask the simple question that started this whole story's unraveling. How do you actually make your money? If you can't get a clear, simple answer, be skeptical. Complexity is often used to hide the truth, not to illuminate it. Second, be wary of a culture that celebrates winning at all costs. True success isn't just about hitting a target, it's about how you get there. A culture that lacks a strong moral compass, that rewards arrogance and punishes dissent, is a culture that is destined to fail. And finally, remember that you are defined by your choices, especially the small ones. Every day presents a choice between the easy wrong and the harder right. The story of Enron is a tragic testament to what happens when enough people, for long enough, consistently choose the easy wrong. That was a summary of The Smartest Guys in the Room by Bethany McLean and Peter Elkind. We've journeyed through the core of this incredible story today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary is like looking at a photograph of the Grand Canyon. You can see the shape of it, but you can't feel the scale, the wind, the sheer awe of standing on the edge. The real power of this book is in the details, the human drama, and the slow, chilling realization of how it all came apart. This summary is your map, to help you decide if the journey is worth your time. If anything we've talked about has sparked your curiosity or given you a moment of pause, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning business history. It's an experience that will fundamentally change how you think about success, ambition, and the stories we tell ourselves. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to bring you these journeys into the most impactful books on the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.